I don't know why the Jews brought this man, Jesus, to me. They told me he had claimed to be the King of the Jews, a title that had not been held by anyone in this land since Herod the Great. They claimed that his offense was a capital crime. When I asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" he replied cryptically, "You say that I am." What did he mean by that? I did not say he was the King of the Jews. The chief priests accused him of many things, including heresy, which was not my place to judge. Yet still this man said nothing. He neither proclaimed his innocence nor shouted that he was the king, the chosen one. How could I condemn a man to death who said nothing? I sent Jesus to Herod, who was in Jerusalem at the time. Jesus wouldn't talk to Herod either, so I went back to the chief priests and told them, "I find no fault in this man." The priests kept accusing him as crowds gathered to see what was happening. They claimed that he was a revolutionary, that he had encouraged people not to pay tribute to Caesar, and on went the claims. The whole time this man stood there with his head bowed and said not a word. Such charges could not be left unpunished, but I did not see death as fitting. Since it was tradition to release one prisoner during the Passover, I proposed to release Jesus of Nazareth. A voice spoke, barely audible over the noise of the crowd. "Not Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Barabbas. Release Barabbas." What was this person thinking? Barabbas had killed a Roman citizen. He was the one deserving of death. But soon a chant arose among the crowd. "Barabbas! Barabbas!" I feared a riot would break out soon, no matter which one I released. I ordered the guards to be prepared. Then I stood before the crowd and asked, what shall I do with the one you call the King of the Jews?" I saw the chief priests whispering to people in the crowd. Then a voice shouted out, "Crucify him!" Soon the whole crowd was crying, "Crucify him!" I held up my hand for silence and asked, "What crime has he committed?" But they did not hear me. They kept crying, "Crucify! Crucify!" To prevent a riot, I released Barabbas. I had Jesus of Nazareth flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Such injustice, dictated by a mob.
Traveling into Jerusalem on a day I will never forget. Usually the whole road becomes a marketplace. All you can hear are the voices of vendors selling their wares. But that day I heard voices cheering, jeering, and taunting. So I went to see what was happening. As I pushed through the crowd, I saw a man carrying a large wooden cross. A crown of thorns had been shoved into his head. He was in pain, and he looked worn and defeated as he hung his head, sweat and blood running down his face. 2 Roman soldiers prodded him forward, forcing him to carry the huge, heavy wooden cross upon his back. He was dragging the cross and sinking under its weight. The soldiers mocked him and poked him with the butts of their spears. Just as he arrived at the place where I was standing, he stumbled and fell. The cross crashed to the ground. After a few efforts to get the man to pick up the instrument that would soon bring him death, the soldiers began scanning the crowd. I tried to look away. Not me, I thought. Don't choose me. As one of the soldiers came over, I held my breath, hoping he would go away. But he grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the road. "You, pick up that cross and carry it," he barked. I leaned down and put my shoulder into the crux where the 2 boards met, lifting the heavy cross and stooping under its weight. As we walked down the road, I heard the man whisper in a dry, raspy voice, "God bless you, friend." I turned my head to look at him and saw blood trickling from the corner of his mouth where one of the soldiers must have struck him. I will never forget the look in the man's eyes. What I saw in them was not defeat but grief, a strange yet beautiful grief, as if he were grieving for all of us rather than fearing his own death. I did not know this man, nor what he had done, but that look stirred my soul. When we finally reached the top of the hill called Golgotha, the soldier ordered me to put the cross down and leave, but I knew I had to stay. Even if it meant watching this man die, I had to know who he was.
He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken.
One of the soldiers laid Jesus on the cross and held his arm firmly against the board. The other soldier set the nail upon his wrist and hit it with a large mallet. Every blow caused Jesus' body to twist in pain. I could see tears flowing down his cheeks. Two other men were also being prepared for crucifixion, and their screams sent chills down my spine. The crowd kept taunting and chanting. One of the soldiers spat in Jesus' face and as the nails were being secured. As I turned my head away, I could see the man who had carried Jesus' cross. He was standing there watching, wincing at the blows being struck. He couldn't seem to take his eyes off Jesus. Maybe he had found in those few minutes with Jesus what it had taken the rest of us years to see. Above his head, the soldiers nailed a sign that read, "The King of the Jews." Two soldiers lifted the cross roughly and carried it to a place on the hill where 3 holes had been dug. One of the criminals had been brought over earlier, and his cross had already been dropped into the first hole. The soldiers lined the cross up with the second hole, and then lifted it up and dropped it in. I could hear Jesus gasp as the impact jarred his pain-racked body. A little way off, a few soldiers cast lots for Jesus' clothes. Part of me wished I could be with that group so I might save something of Jesus for myself. The crowd continued to taunt him, telling him to save himself. I found myself crying silently, "Why, O Lord? Why?"
My body hung forward, making each breath painful. My mouth was parched. I could hear the taunts of the crowd, and they stung. My Father loved these people so much that I was offering myself for them. I was dying to give life to those who were taunting me, as well as to those who had followed me for years. I could hear one of the men on the cross next to me trying to get enough breath to speak. Once he had filled his lungs with air, he hissed, "Aren't you the Messiah?" He paused, pushing himself upward to get more breath. "Save yourself and us." The other man lifted himself up to grab a breath and replied, "Don't you fear God?" Pausing as he gasped for more breath. "Since you are under the same sentence?" He labored for more breath so that he could speak again. "We are punished justly." Another gasp. "But this man has done nothing wrong." Then there was a long pause as he lifted himself up again to breathe his last words. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." I pushed down on my feet to lift myself up for breath. I had to respond. "I tell you the truth," I said, pausing for another breath. "Today, you will be with me in paradise."
I had been assigned to watch the cross of this man they called Jesus of Nazareth, just in case he comes down. Jesus didn't look like he was going anywhere. His head hung limp as he struggled for every breath. I had watched many crucifixions in my service with the Roman army, and no one had ever come down. This man didn't seem any different. As the time reached midday, dark clouds swiftly moved in, blotting out the sun and chilling the air. I pulled my cloak tighter. The wind began to blow, whistling as it whipped through. The crowd quieted, though. Some still taunted and jeered. Many people left, having had their fun. A small group of women, weeping and wailing, stood a short way from the cross. Soon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." I did not understand the language of the Jews, but I heard some men standing nearby claiming he was calling for their prophet Elijah. I gripped my spear a bit tighter and waited to see what would happen. A man ran up with a sponge tied to a stick. The sponge was wet, almost dripping with wine vinegar. I could smell the wine as he lifted up the stick, but the man on the cross, as parched as he was, did not drink. Then I watched as Jesus pulled himself upright, struggling to fill his lungs with air. He cried out again in a loud voice. The ground began to tremble and shake violently, causing me to fall to my knees. I could feel the power in the air and knew that God must be with this man, Jesus. Jesus' head fell forward and his body went limp as he passed from this life. At that moment, I knew that the stories I had heard were true. Surely this man was the Son of God.